If you've had a chance to try out the features demo game in the latest version of AnyRPG, you may have noticed that there is now a day and night cycle included. The shadows shift as the time of day changes, the skybox rotates, the sounds change, and eventually, at nighttime, the daytime skybox is replaced with a starry sky night skybox. In this video, I will be demonstrating how to configure the day and night cycle for your game, so let's get started. For this tutorial, I will be using AnyRPG Engine 0.15, which is available as a free download from anyrpg.org/downloads in Unity package format. You can also use AnyRPG Core, which is a free download from the Unity Asset Store. I will also be using one other free asset from the Unity Asset Store. It is the Green Forest free asset by Purple Jump, and it's just got a nice demo scene included with some trees that we can use to line up some of our shadows as we adjust our day and night cycle. Let's walk through the project setup. Once you install the Green Forest asset, you will notice a couple of warnings and errors in your console. Don't worry about the warnings, they can be mostly ignored as we won't be using the post-processing stack for this demo, but we do need to fix that error. To do that, I will open up the Green Forest directory in my project and just delete the entire post-processing directory. That will get rid of all the scripts and everything should recompile, and there should be no more errors. To create the project, I will go to the Tools menu and choose AnyRPG Wizard, New Game Wizard. I'll set the game name as Day Night. I will set the first scene name as Forest. I'll choose Copy Existing Scene and look under the Green Forest Scenes folder and pull in the scene that's just called Scene. For the day ambient sounds, I will choose the Spring Birds Loop. And for the night ambient sounds, I will choose the cricket ambience loop. I'm going to uncheck all of the common RPG building blocks as we don't need any template content for this. We only need to use the scene node, environment settings, and game manager to configure the day and night cycle. Next, I'll click on Create and wait for the New Game Wizard to complete. With the game created, let's start setting up the day and night cycle. First, I'm going to open the Games folder and look under the Day-Night folder under Prefab and Game Manager and click on the Day-Night Game Manager. The day and night default settings can be found near the bottom of the System Configuration settings. The first thing to be aware of is the time of day speed. This is a multiplier. When you start your game, the time will be synced to the real-world time, so 9:40 p.m. right now when I'm recording this. If I want the time in the game to run faster than real-world time, I can increase this value. For example, if I set it to a value of 24, then 1 hour of real time will equal 1 day of in-game time. In this case, however, I want 1 minute of real time to equal 1 day of in-game time, so I will set the value to 1440. So our in-game clock is running 1440 times faster than our real-world clock. The next setting to be aware of is the default sun angle. This sun angle will not automatically apply to all of your scenes, but can be used in all of your scenes when you configure it in the scene node. Let's take a look at how the sun angle works. To do that, I am going to click on the directional light in the scene and just hit F to focus on it. Now what I'm actually going to do is find a nice spot for this directional light and move it because we can put it really anywhere in the scene and it doesn't matter, so I'm just going to hit Control-Alt-F and position that right here near to some trees where we can see how it's going to affect the shadows. I'm going to set the mode to real time for this demo, and next I'm going to clear the rotation on the directional light. So we'll go to Reset Property and just choose Rotation and set that to 0. In AnyRPG, the Z forward direction is north. So you can see that when I have positioned my camera so that Z is directly forward, now the directional light is basically facing directly north. This is the 0 angle. When we are looking at the game manager, any rotation that we do around the x-axis is what that angle controls. So if I look at the day and night game manager, and we see that the default sun angle is 120, that means that the directional light will be rotated 120 degrees around the x-axis. So let's take a look at what that will look like in the game. I'm going to rotate that using just manual input here. So if I rotate the directional light 120 degrees around the x-axis, you can see that the sun is now basically in the northern part of the sky, and it's facing south, and you can see that the shadows are facing south as well. Let's get rid of the wind zone in the scene and the camera in the scene, as we really don't need those. And I'm just going to middle click on the ground right here with my mouse, and then select the default spawn location and hit Control Alt F, and now my player will spawn in this location as well. Next, let's take a look at the sun gradient. If we go to the day and night game manager again, and we look at the sun gradient, you can see that on the bottom we have colors, and on the top we have alpha values. The directional light in Unity will ignore the alpha values, but we will be using those for the blended skybox later in the tutorial. The way that this gradient editor works is the very center of it is the color that the sun will be set to at noon, and the ends are midnight. So at noon the sun will be this whitish yellow color. At 3 p.m. it will start transitioning towards this reddish color, where it will be at 6 p.m. and then it will start transitioning toward a bluish color where it will be at midnight, and then we wrap around again, transition back towards a yellowy color at 6 a.m., still the same yellowy color at 9 a.m., and then more of a yellowy white at noon. Let's actually start configuring the scene now in order to get the day and night cycle working. To do that, I'm going to go into the scene node folder and look at the forest scene node, and then look for the time of day settings. What we want to do is set the sun rotation mode to sun, which means it's just going to rotate that directional light in place. Because it's a directional light, it doesn't really matter where we have it in the scene. The light is just basically coming from everywhere and facing in the direction of that sun angle. I am also going to use the default sun angle, so that was that sun angle of 120 degrees. If you want to have a different sun angle for your scene, you can uncheck this box and set that manually. I'm going to choose to rotate the sun color, and I'm also going to use the default sun gradient, which is that gradient that we had defined in our game manager. But if you uncheck the use default sun gradient, you can just manually set whatever gradient you want for the sun in your scene if a specific scene needs to override those values. Next, I'm just going to go back to my scene lighting settings, and I don't have a window for that yet. So I'm going to go to Window, Rendering, Lighting, and I'm just going to dock this up here. I'm going to go to the environment, and I'm going to pull the directional light into the main sun source for the scene. And I'm going to uncheck the fog, as we basically don't want anything messing with the colors, because I want to use the colors that are chosen by the day and night cycle settings so that we can demo all that properly. This looks pretty good. Let's save that and press play and see what happens. Once the game loads, we can hear some sounds playing. Right now that spring bird sound is playing, and you can see the shadows slowly moving across the level. However, the skybox is not changing. We've still got clouds, and those clouds will persist no matter what time it is. So let's see how we can make the skybox shift and get a proper day and night effect happening. I'm going to go back to the forest scene node and go to the inspector and select blended skybox. And next I am going to go into the lighting settings for the scene under environment, and I'm actually going to add a blended skybox that's included with AnyRPG. To do that, I'm just going to search for skybox in my project and look for the clouds space skybox and pull it into the scene settings there. Let's take a look at the clouds space skybox. This is using a blended skybox shader, and we can see that there are a number of settings here. If I go back to the scene and take a look at this skybox, we can see that the blend is set to 0 and it's currently set to the clouds, and as I pull that blend over all the way to 1, then it slowly changes until we have the night sky skybox. And that's because this skybox is special. Instead of just having the regular 6 textures, it actually has 12, 6 for day and 6 for night. It also has a rotation setting, which we will examine in a few minutes here. Let's press play though and just see how the skybox blend works. As you can see right now it's nighttime, and as the time progresses, now we slowly get this blend until all the stars are gone, and now we have a daytime skybox. But it doesn't really make sense that the sky is just going to stay static. Even as we go back to nighttime, the stars would stay in the place. So what we want is for the skybox to actually be rotated, and it'll look just a little bit more realistic. Let's see how to do that. We'll go back to the scene node folder here and go back to the forest scene node, and this time we are going to check the box that says rotate skybox. Let's press play and see what that looks like. Now you can see that the skybox is slowly rotating, which is definitely a bit more realistic, especially at nighttime, as stars should definitely be moving across the sky. However, if you look at this skybox, you'll see that there's a sun in this skybox right here, but if we look at the shadows for the player, the shadows are facing towards the sun rather than away from the sun. Let's look at how we will manage getting that looking a little better. To do that, we'll have to use the Skybox Rotation offset. So let's go back to the lighting settings here under Environment, and we'll look at the Clouds Space Skybox, and we'll just set the blend back to 0 here. And then let's deal with the Skybox Rotation. In this case, because of the fact that the shadows are facing south in this scene, what we want is at noon, if we're facing north, we should have the sun basically directly in front of us. So let's rotate the skybox until we see the sun basically directly in the center of our screen. There it is. That's pretty good. The sun is basically almost directly in the center of our screen right now. So what that means is that we need a rotation to basically 305 degrees in order for the sun to be in the center of our screen at noon. However, the skybox offset is actually set for midnight, so what I'm going to do is just flip this around so that we are looking directly south. There we go. Okay, now we're looking directly south, and so I want to position the skybox where it should be at midnight. So now the skybox is about in the center of my screen, so I want the skybox offset to be 110 degrees. Let's go back to the scene node and just set that. So we'll go to the forest scene node, and we'll set the skybox rotation offset to 110 degrees. If you have trouble remembering, you can just look at the tool tip here. the rotation offset required to position the skybox so the sun is in the correct position at midnight. Okay, let's save those changes and press play. So now the skybox is rotating, and what we want to do is just watch for the sun and see if it's tracking the shadows properly. So as the skybox moves, we can now see that if we basically draw a line through the sun and through our character, then the shadows are properly tracking basically where this sun that's part of our skybox is in the sky, mostly. Unfortunately, it would be great if we could have the sun move up and down, but because most skyboxes include sort of a ground, that's not really possible. But this pretty much approximates the effect. Now, there's one more setting in here that we haven't looked at yet, and that's the reverse skybox rotation. So right now our sun is at an angle of 120 degrees. Let's go ahead and just change that angle. If we want to, we can rotate it around the x-axis, move it so that the sun is facing from the south and the shadows are in the north. Let's just set that to 60 there. This will just give us an idea of what the light will look like at a particular angle. So let's go to the scene node and set that as the value for the sun, as the rotation in the scene will actually be overridden. So we'll go to the forest scene node and we'll set the sun angle. We'll uncheck the use default sun angle, set the sun angle to 60 degrees, save those settings, and press play. Now when we load our game, we can see that the sun is still moving in the same direction. However, the shadows are moving towards the sun or opposite from it. This is because we've now basically moved this level into a different hemisphere by adjusting how the sun is rotating. So what we need to do is actually adjust the rotation of the skybox. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to click on Reverse Skybox Rotation. Let's press play and see how that looks. Now, because we are in the other hemisphere, then the skybox is rotating properly, but there is one more issue that you can potentially see here, and that is even though the shadows are basically lining up with the sun and the character, the shadows are now facing in the wrong direction. And that's basically because we have swapped hemispheres. So what we actually need to do is one more change here, and that's to change the skybox rotation offset. Because we're in another hemisphere, we basically need to change that and add 180 degrees to it. We can go to File, Save, and press play. This should make things work a lot smoother because now that our character is in the northern hemisphere, the sun should be south of him during the day and directly south at noon. And if you look, you can see that the shadows are moving properly and basically creating a direct line between the sun to the player to the shadows. Now let's see how we would configure day and night cycle settings if we had a skybox that didn't include a sun with it. To do that, I am going to go to the lighting settings. Once again, click on Environment, and this time I'm going to choose the Clear Space Skybox. If you look at the sky, you can see we now have a sky with no clouds in it and no sun in it. The Clear Space Skybox is another blended skybox. So let's set up a new sun for the level that will actually work with this. I'm going to delete this default directional light right here, and I'm going to search my project for the word rotator, and I'll find this sun rotator here, and I will drag it into the scene. I'm going to open up the sun rotator, grab the sun light from it, and then move that into the sun source for the level. Now, what we want to do with this sun rotator is, because it actually physically places a sun in the level, you can see we've got this particle system here, which is causing basically the effect of a giant ball of light in the sky. This one will actually be physically rotated, so we want to actually place this in the actual center of the scene, or as close to it as we can get. So I'm just going to load the scene view from above here. I'm going to middle click in approximately the center and click on Control-Alt-F. Then I'm going to hit F to focus that. So what you can see if we go into the inspector is this one is currently set with no rotation, and so it's basically pointing directly north and south. So when we rotate this, let's set this to be the same rotation around the x-axis as the sun currently is, so that's 60 degrees. And now the sun is up in the sky. When we rotate the sun from side to side, it's basically going to go set on one side of the level and rise and set on the other side of the level. What we can do now is, because this level is basically 1,000 meters wide and the sun is only like about 500 meters, it's going to kind of cut through the edge of the map. So we're just going to adjust the sun to make it basically 700 meters away from the rotator. It's always pointing directly towards the rotator because we have its rotation set to 0. Now if we look at the sun rotator, and it's going to set basically off the side of the map. That looks pretty good. Let's save that, and the next thing that we need to do is go back to our scene node and just make one setting configuration change. I'm going to go back to the forest scene node here, and instead of setting the sun rotation mode to sun, I'm going to set the sun rotation mode to parent. This means that instead of trying to rotate the actual sun, it's going to rotate this sun rotator object instead. Let's save that and press play and see how it looks. Okay, you can see the sun over there. It's getting ready to rise. Now you can see it moving through the sky. And this sun rotator does a little bit more of an accurate loop considering where the position of the sun would be, because it's not just rotating only around the y-axis, it's rotating basically the way you would expect it if it was 60 degrees offset from the player, or from the world basically. And we can see that it basically moves over the level and then sets in the other side of the level. And then, of course, at night, because we have a skybox that has more details on it, we can actually see the rotation of the stars happening. That is how you configure a day and night cycle in your game. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, don't forget to thumbs up the video and subscribe to the AnyRPG YouTube channel. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next video.